also serve as a research scholar at the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology here at DePaul University. So we are like the Trinity here. There are three of us who are organizing this series that today is the premiere of the series. So I will let my other colleagues here to introduce themselves.
I'm Paula McQuaid. I'm in the Departments of English and Catholic Studies.
And I'm Rocco Sacconaghi, and I'm in the Department of Catholic Studies.
So today we will introduce you to what this series is all about. And we will do that in three ways. So I will tell you what the series is about. And Rocco will tell you why the series. And Paula will show you how it's going to be carried out. And we hope that you will enjoy this moment of deep encounter and friendship. So what I'm going to speak on is what we have called Faith Unfiltered, why I still believe in God. And I want to begin by saying that when we listen to our stories and when we allow ourselves to be touched by other people's stories, and when we ourselves share our own stories with others, there is one realization among many that occurs. We find that all our stories all help us to understand our connections, and that we all are facing similar situations and circumstances in this life. In the story of everyone, in the stories of the cries of the earth, the stories of the cries of the poor, of the marginalized, the stories of the cries of nature, I hear the echo of my own story. And it is only by stopping and paying attention to these stories can we get the wonderful illumination that even happens like a revelation, a mysterious opening into a bigger world than our worlds. Then we can have this exhilarating realization that our human and cosmic stories are connected. We can see that our stories can also be redeemed by love, so that human finality, which often for some is a threat, it's like something that is trying to destroy my being. When I meet a limit situation, I want to go out of this place and the whole place is locked. That our human finality is actually a liberation. Because in that finality, as we realize our own vulnerability, we suddenly see that there is something that is expansive about my human limitation. Now, as we enter into these stories, we also realize that our stories can be redeemed by love, by friendship, by fidelity, by mercy, by peace, by awe, by suspense, or even by surprises. So as we enter into the stories of everyone, we will be surprised by love, and even an eruption of something that is redemptive beyond often the contamination that some of us might feel, especially when you feel that pang of your human vulnerability and think that your story cannot be redeemed. And for those of us who are Christians, that we find that the cross can actually be the boundary beyond which evil or our human limitation can no longer be a burden, but rather, if you like, infinite grace, something inexhaustible, because the pain and suffering and the death of the poor man of Galilee becomes a unique example of what happens when every moment of our life or our closed narrative of our humanly designed structures, weaknesses, mistakes melt away beyond the infinite horizon of the divine. So what I present, I just give a few indications of what I've just said. What we want to do is to create a space here at DePaul where we can tell our stories of brokenness, wounds, our dreams, our stories of hope, and all that. And whether within that story we can experience the intimations of something beyond us that people might call God or love or Chineke, if I use my own Igbo language, or even my own name, Chukwudi Ebube, that I reduced to Chu, which is the glory of God. That's my tribal name that was given to me after the devastating war that occurred in my country. And I was born in this refugee camp, St. John's, at a place called Aban in eastern Nigeria. Still, anytime I go home, I like to go there now to see where that tiny boy was born. And I was born with this closed fist, as if to say I was going to confront a lot of darkness, death, and despair that surrounded my birth. But my name was a tribal name that signifies an ancestral continuity beyond the shadows that surrounded my people in 1970. And so that's the kind of, hopefully, that we can come into this space as friends, tell our stories. I'd like to go quickly in the next 5-10 minutes about the idea of the university. Ronald J. Daniels writes, an American university is a place where at its best, reason and fact are venerated, where individual acts of imagination and insight that challenge orthodoxies receive support and encouragement, where ideas are hatched that change our understanding of the world around us, bring us closer to truth, and offer the prospect of human understanding of the world around us, bring us closer to the truth, and offer the prospect of human advancement. It is a place where fellow citizens from all walks of life can transcend their circumstances through the acquisition of knowledge and cultivation of mastery, and where scientific investigation generates technologies and therapies that materially improve human flourishing. What universities owe democracy. Just a quick view of some ideas of university by different Americans. In 1987, it was a bestseller, Alan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind, that the argument is that the university in a society ruled by public opinion was to have been an island of intellectual freedom, where all views were investigated without restriction. Liberal democracy in its generosity made this possible, and I'm quoting from the book, page 18, made this possible by consenting to play an active or positive and participatory role in society. However, the university has become inundated and saturated with the backflow of society's problems, preoccupied with questions of health, sex, race, war, academics. I must make this disclaimer. I don't totally agree with this, but I'm just giving you a snapshot of different understanding and opinions about the university. So in the heat of the dispute between the left and the right, as it grows fierce in the last decade, he argues the university public discourse has suffered a scorching as antagonists seem no longer to listen to one another. What he said in 1987 is still true today, that the tribal warfare between the right and the left, the blue state and the red states, continue to accelerate. And this affects even religious groups that I once said in a church that soon, even in my own tradition, the Catholic Church, we might start to think of a blue altar and a red altar because of the polarization in today's society. So can we have a depolarizing space? A university should be that kind of depolarizing space where people can soar beyond these binaries and begin to look at the other side of the coin with some sense of elegance, flexibility, and joy, knowing that there is joy in multiplicity of perspectives, and that these perspectives, in my own understanding, they actually complement each other. They're not supposed to be, I would say, rigidly dialectical, that you cannot find a middle ground. So some questions. I will skip this because I think we didn't start on time. I wanna get to some of the pictures I want you to look at. So this is my own questions. The university as a place where the bigger questions are being asked. The university as a place where the students are led into a world that is bigger than themselves. I'm kind of writing this morning, asking the question, are we asking the bigger questions here, where students are driven to soar beyond their limitations, not to be imprisoned by those restrictive ideologies of power that held their ancestors down, where they can reimagine a future that is better than today, rather than be imprisoned by those polarities that have stifled human creativity in our modern world. The university is also a community where people are learning to live. And this is Pierre Hadot from his book, Philosophy as a Way of Life. And I'm sure Rocco can help give flesh to what I have just given you in skeletal form. That in ancient tradition, in the academies in Athens, what you find, they say where you have a symposium, you have also a gymnasium, some kind of training of the mind and training of the body, a healthy mind in a healthy body, learning how to live, learning to dialogue, learning to die. It's not to take your own life here, but it's somehow something Francis of Assisi said, in dying we are born, is it? So like the Lord Jesus says, if you want to gain your life, you have to give it up. But also dying to self, dying to your ideologies, dying to the social constructions that you have embodied, dying to your bias and all that, learning to live together. The Catholic University, I think, does all this, learning to live, learning to dialogue, learning to die, learning to live together. But it does more. It must make, in my own thinking, it must make the question of God and values a central concern, and the question of meaning and ultimate purpose of the moral demand and the human pilgrimage as primary. Where are we going? Where are we going? The complexity between what Andrew Walls calls indigenous and pilgrimage principle, some form of nativism. Okay, we want to go back to our roots. We might get attached to our ancestral roots. And then the other form, pilgrimage, you have to leave. You have to leave your home all of us, somehow, students, professors, most of us are here because we made a pilgrimage to come here, not just for this, into this space of encounter, but also from choosing where to study, choosing where to work. We are constantly on the move. The humanity is constantly on the move. And when you enter into that reality, what you see is some form of our own dependency on each other. And that's why, in a more specific sense, I say the idea of a Catholic university, it advances dialogue between faith and reason. I just take this randomly from Catholic sources, including John Henry Newman, the idea of a university. We must advance dialogue between faith and science, discover and impart truth through teaching and learning. Truth, broadly conceived, not indoctrination or confessional truths, even though that should also be part of the bargain. Seek, discover, and impart an understanding of the Christian faith within the diverse context of human inquiry and understanding. Seek, discover, and impart all other traditions of faith and non-faith in a discerning and dialogical manner in the humble search for the truth that transcends traditions, ideologies, and points of view. It must develop the intellectual habits of curiosity, a desire for truth in the students through intellectual humility and self-surrender. It must equip students with tools for moral clarification and an expansive intellectual and moral resources for choosing good over evil. It must equip students and faculty with the resources to live a good life, to find their path in life, and to work together with others in promoting the common good and bringing the world with all its ambiguities to conform to God's plan. It must equip the student with the skills to serve their communities and our common humanity through the gift of their lives, knowledge, skills, careers, and all that. So I kind of want to conclude, and then I give you some pictures of what we hope will be happening in this space. These are things I have heard since the time of COVID. Now, in 2020, just as COVID was it started in China, and I remember my students were writing about it in our class on a seminar on multiculturalism. So a friend of mine visited from Kenya, and we went downtown. That was actually the first time. Flights had started to resume again, but not so much. So he came, and we went downtown. And we were crossing the bridge on Roosevelt. We were crossing the bridge, the Chicago River. And then we saw a guy with a knapsack, and we said, "Can you take our picture?" And then we gave him the cell phone. He said, I've never seen a cell phone. And my friend who's visiting from Kenya says to me in my language, an American doesn't know how to use cell phone. So maybe he doesn't want to take our picture. So I said, no, he said, I am just coming from jail. They released me today. And when I was sent to jail, I don't know what this is. So I don't know. So I was just moving. Then I say, where are you going to? I do not know where I'm going. And then he left. And till date, I keep on wondering, where? Where was his family? Friends? Where is society? He was released to go where? How many people in our world today? How many of our students here at DePaul who say, I don't know what I am doing. I don't know my major. I don't know my minor. How are they accompanied? Or is this just like a factory? You're just students, you're in a factory line, and then you're passed off from one teacher to the other. Then I heard Just 2 days ago, if you're listening, I listened to Al Jazeera, I listened to BBC, I listened to France 24. Then I had one woman as this incursion now into Rafah, and was interviewed, said, we have nowhere to go. We have nowhere to go. I was in northern Italy for the 3 months last year, and I visited many. I was working with seniors. And one senior said to me, COVID has taken everything from us. And we're still grieving because we couldn't grieve. We couldn't grieve our family members during COVID. And then this is the common question people ask me everywhere I go. It's like it follows me like my fingerprint. Where do you come from? It's like the question that Pilate asked Jesus, where do you come from? So, and then I say, oh, well, I'm from the poor. I mean, where is home for you? But that's also a fundamental question, each and every one of us. Where is home for you? Well, I go back to my parents, I go back to my ancestors. Where is your home, really? Where do you find home? It's like Heidegger, when he talks about the framing of technology after the Second World War, with the destruction of many places in Germany. Heidegger said that what pained the Germans most was not the destruction of their homes, but whether they will still find a home to dwell in. So where is home for you? Where do you dwell? Where do you find comfort? I'm overwhelmed. I don't know if I can come to school today. I don't know, some of my students here, none of you. I'm not quoting any of you, please, if you are. But I hear that often, like I'm overwhelmed. I don't know if I can come to school today. Yeah, I've had a friend of mine just last Saturday, a board member of our organization in Canada, Oge. I am a cancer survivor. That's what I wanted. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me how I survived cervical cancer. They gave me only 3 years, but I'm 10 years cancer free. I don't know how I survived. And when I pressed more, I said, it's only God who really can explain that to me when I see God up there. Then none of my students that I was going to be presiding at their wedding just told me, it's over. He cheated on me. I don't believe in love anymore. So the wedding has been called over, no more. This one is my favorite line from Desmond Tutu. God has a dream. That's what he told the South Africans after apartheid and black on black violence. And people said, are you sure this country will survive? They're going to the polls today. In spite of all the challenges, he said, God has a dream, and I believe in that dream. So is there anybody who loves me? People say that, they might not say that, but inside that's what every one of us. Is there anybody who really cares? Is there anybody who wants to stay home for me? Is there anybody who really wants to be with me in my place of pain without exploiting me, especially when I'm not in control, when I feel like crying, a shoulder to cry on? Is there anyone who can hold me and give me a sense of belonging? Is there anyone who can lead me from despair to hope? Are there people out there who feel the sense of divine vocation, who are driven by an evangelical zeal to enter into deep solidarity with the anguish, underlining all the glitter of success in the world, and to bring the light of Jesus in our situation of profound moral and spiritual handicap and frightening social changes? So I think ultimately the power of stories is not very, very visible, but the story, each one of us is like a small cell. That's how your life began. And then by listening to each other's stories, attending to it, seeing what we see, stepping into the chaos of other people's lives, listening, paying attention, it starts to grow. And then we get to the point where we can collectively become stewards of each other's life, each other's stories, each other's dreams. That's the way I see it. That's what this is about, how we can enter into that story so that we can enter and journey together into a bigger world here. I'll go quickly. I will skip this one. What does this hope look like? So these are images I want you to think of. People running in a marathon, and Mother Teresa said, go out into the world today and love the people you meet. So we want to have a space where we can express that love beyond grading papers and, completing evaluations for those of us who are professors or going through tenure or all those stuff. So I think it's about lending a helping hand to those who cannot make it. So this is Pope Francis. I like this quote. Religions remind us that civilizations survive not by strength, but by how they respond to the weak, not by wealth, but by the care they show for the poor, not by power, but by their concern for the powerless. The ironic yet utterly humane lesson of history is that what renders a culture invulnerable is the compassion it shows to the vulnerable. The ultimate value we should be concerned to maximize is human dignity, the dignity of all human beings equally as children of the creative, redeeming God. This is from Rabbi Jonathan Sack in the book, The Dignity of Difference. I like this. I saw this in Soroti in northern Uganda. The kids were playing this way. Again, can we create that kind of community where we hold each other's hand? That's what we want to do. Create a space. So if anyone who knows African traditions, in that story, once they hold hand this way, they run around and they come inside. They go back and they do, and then the person who tells the story will come in the middle to tell his or her story. Then after you go back again, they hold hand and dance around. Therefore, it's like we are all stewards of each other's stories. That's what we want to do here in this space. This is my friend Cardinal Onaikon at an event in ITFA. We organized with the Turkish Center for Islamic Affairs in Toronto, and the Cardinal who promotes interreligious dialogue in my home country. He came around and I just caught that picture. And I mean, when you look at how they look at each other, the Muslim and the Christian, this is also what we hope to do here, to look each other in the eyes. And what do you see? The face that calls you to be who you are meant to be. Then Mother Teresa feeding a dying person in the gutters. Again, she said, everyone is beautiful unto God. And listening to each other, being there for each other is doing something beautiful to God. Now, finally, this one moves me profoundly. This man died 4 years ago, but that's Pope Francis. Touching and kissing the wounds of this man. And Pope Francis didn't know. It's not like he didn't know that this man was not contagious. This disease was not contagious. He was just spontaneously, he did. You can see his hand already filled with blood. Really, I think each and every one of us, we all carry our own wounds. There is a hole in every human heart. Sometimes we tell our story, sometimes we don't. That's really what we're trying to do, so that we can create a space here at the Paul where people can come and know that they will not be judged, but that their wounds will be touched. And in touching that wounds, it will be bandaged. So I'd like to conclude with what Socrates said. You can come in, Dominique. There's a spot there. Yeah. I like to conclude by quoting Socrates. Socrates once said, I will spend my whole life, I don't want to acquire wealth, I don't want to acquire fame. I just try. To his friends, he said, on how do you make progress in life? I try to persuade each of you, he said, to concern yourself less with what you have, but how you can render yourself more excellent and more rational as possible. I mean, how do we find that? That is part of the journey, because through each other, we can enter a world bigger than each and every one of us. Now, don't ask me, what have all these things, what you will ask all these things, what has it to do with why I still believe in God? I tell you the story. I am painting God as a little girl. Was busy painting. The mother asked the little girl, what are you doing? I am painting God. I am drawing God. The mother said, no one has seen God. The little girl said, they will see him once I'm done with my painting. So hopefully what we paint through these stories can give you just a small intimation of this ineffable reality that has concerned so many minds. And the more you get to know, even the less you know. But that's the difference between being a creature and being the creator. And humility makes it possible for us to embrace that. Yes, we don't know, but in the midst of the community, we can begin to know something bigger than ourselves. Thank you very much.
Do you want it down?
The other camera to face the
I
room,
don't have that one right there.
like, so that they can see the whole table.
Good job, thank you.
Is that this way?
Yeah, that looks good, right?
Oh, okay. This.
It's harder to move mine. I think this is, I think, yeah, escape worked.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I know that you can. I was asking to the friends and colleagues connected.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Shorten my presentation. Stan asked me to answer a difficult question, that is why. And you already answered this question. The question why we decided, answer beautifully to the question why we had this idea. You proposed us this idea. I gladly accepted to join the project, but I wanted to specifically address the question about why witnesses. Why did we decide to address the question about God and about faith through personal witnesses? And so I started with this famous quote, I'm sure that the students might know it as well, by Nietzsche. In 1882, he wrote this famous sentence, God is dead, God remains dead, his language is powerful, and so let's read this quote that conveys that idea and also another idea connected to it that sometimes is forgotten. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. He's talking about the idea of God. The idea of God is not able to move our lives, to shape our lives anymore. 104 years ago. This tremendous event is still on its way. It has not yet reached the ears of man. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves. So he reverses the argument by Feuerbach. We have not created God without knowing it. We have killed God without knowing it, but we have not realized it yet. And in fact, in Europe, in 1882, atheism was still a phenomenon that was very little, sociologically speaking. The question is, has this news reached us? There are many signs that it hasn't reached us yet. Just looking at what is going on in American universities, in American politics, and all around the world, we can raise serious doubts about this idea that the idea of God is not shaping the lives of many, many people. Explicitly, with people using God as a weapon, as an ideal, as a threat, as a dream, but also implicitly. But before going to the implicit use of God, let's spend a few words about the so-called new atheists like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. I don't know if the youngest here and on Zoom know these interesting thinkers, but more or less 20 years ago, this phenomenon was big, and these two important books were published, The God Delusion by Dawkins and God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything by Hitchens. Now, I want to offer one particular view on the phenomenon of the so-called new atheists. That is, if we needed the new atheists because God was back. And so the idea that God is dead had to be reiterated with a certain strength. So they were extremely successful. They were great writers. They are, and we are great writers, philosophers, scientists, but they felt the need to reiterate that God is dead because still, after more than 120 years at the time, the news that Nietzsche was spreading had not reached our ears yet. Interestingly, Richard Dawkins, one of them, a few days ago stated that he feels culturally a Christian. Many newspapers talked about it because it was quite a big news. Now, I was talking about an implicit use of God and religion. Well, the explicit use is everywhere, right? But the implicit use is that even atheism, today, many times, even secular ideas, many times absorb religiosity and reinterpret religiosity in implicit ways with a certain passion, sometimes fanaticism, that comes from, usually from religious, strictly speaking, religious traditions, religious ideals. One way to express this was the one used by David Foster Wallace in This Is Water, a commencement speech that he gave in 2005 at Kenyon College, same years as the New Atheists. Interestingly, this is a text that I use often in my classes, and also our colleague William Kavanagh, who is connected, at least was connected, he's not anymore, addresses many times in his books and articles. It's a fascinating commencement speech. You can also find on YouTube he himself giving this speech. It's beautiful, this is just one passage. He addresses many things, many questions, but in this passage, he makes a huge claim, a very strong claim. It's impossible to be practical atheists. Practical atheism doesn't exist because we all worship something. He's not simply saying we all love something, we all like something, we all enjoy something. He's saying we worship something. So and he doesn't expand on this, he doesn't explain this much, but the way in which I understand it, that allows us to better understand in which way even atheism can be somehow religious, at least sometimes, is that there is a dynamic structure in humanity that forces us somehow to give ourselves to something. What atheists in the 19th century called alienation is something that is present in humanity. Now, of course, he's not talking about it in terms of alienation, he's talking about it in terms of worshiping. We give ourselves to something. We don't have the freedom to decide not to worship anything. But his point in this speech is that we have the freedom and the responsibility to decide what to worship. Now, with no statistical and sociological claims, I just wanted to start from the impression that I have that is growing impression that the question about God is present. So with this initiative, at least but I think also my colleagues and friends here, want to address not only a personal interest, but also something that is present in our society in 2024. A question about God. God is a problem. The problem of God is still here. God is dead, but the problem is still here. We were not able to replace God with anything else. We tried, and I chose two excerpts from poems by Lagerlöf, the Swedish poet of the last century, and I will, just read some parts of it. Because we already took some time. In this first poem, Lagerlöf, who by the way won the Nobel Prize in 1951, so he wrote this after Feuerbach, Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud. He knew very well the arguments about the idea of God, the arguments that explain away the idea of God. He knew them. He was not a Christian. He was an atheist, in a sense, a very particular one. I would call him a nostalgic atheist. In this one, he speaks to God. In the following one, he speaks about God. Here, he is referring to God as a friend and a stranger far, far away. For his sake, my heart is full of disquiet because he's not with me, because perhaps, after all, he does not exist. Who are you who so fill my heart with your absence, who fill the entire world with your absence? I think it's a fascinating image. Many times my students find intriguing. It's a bit confusing, but the idea of someone that is present as an absence is powerful in my view. It's not simply something that doesn't exist. You don't feel a longing for someone that simply doesn't exist. God is someone that doesn't exist, but is supposed to be there. Someone that doesn't exist, but somehow used to be there, that we hope to find sometime. And so the idea of filling the entire world with your absence, I think, expresses this other strange atheism that absorbs somehow religiosity. The second one is more direct. He expresses his atheism, but it ends with a powerful question that I would like to address with the next lectures, the coming academic year. The God who does not exist, it is who enkindles my soul, who makes my soul into a wilderness. So it's really when you mourn the loss of someone that your soul is reduced in that way, that feels pain. A reeking ground, a scorched land, reeking after a fire because it does not exist. He it is who saved my soul by making it a desert and scorched. The God who does not exist, the awesome God. Why should a being lie down there in the darkness crying to someone who does not exist? This is the question. Why should that be? There is no one who hears when someone cries in the darkness. But why does that cry exist? Marx's answer was because of capitalism, because of our socioeconomic structure. So religion is a byproduct of the injustice of our society. Once we fix the political problem, the problem of God will fade away. Lagervist is insisting, saying, I don't know why I have this cry. God is not there. I've never seen God. I don't see traces of God. The trace of God, the sign of God, is precisely this feeling of an unbearable absence. This was just an introduction to express in different ways how I think the problem of God is still present today. Not because we are religious, but because it is a problem that somehow pertains to our human condition. So now I will briefly explore 3 cognitive implications of our decision to address the problem of God through personal witnesses. That was a choice. We could have addressed it through sociology, through statistics, through psychology, history, theology, philosophy. We will have witnesses starting today, and I'm thankful to Paula because I think that a witness is always a gift, and I don't take for granted that people want to share their experience of such a delicate and personal matter. The first implication from a cognitive, epistemological point of view that I want to address is the fact that we are inserting everyday life into the academic world. I'm a philosopher, Paul is an expert on English literature, Stan is a theologian, so we have expertise, but again, we will ask people to share their lives. And so what about this connection? I think that we will see a bit better, a bit more clearly that knowledge in general, but in particular when we speak of God, is dramatic. There's nothing mechanic about it. There's nothing automatic. And I chose this quote from a book written by Ratzinger in 1968, an interesting date, in which he describes this intertwinement, this unavoidable intertwinement between faith and doubt. Not only religious people, but also in atheists. Religious people will always deal with doubts, but also atheists will. And he writes the second half, anyone who makes up their mind to evade the uncertainty of belief will have to experience the uncertainty of unbelief, which can never finally eliminate for certain the possibility that belief may after all be the truth. It is not until belief is rejected then its unrejectability becomes evident. This is just one way of describing this character of knowledge. It's dramatic. Second aspect, relational knowledge. This is more evident, I think. Once someone shares their experience with you, the possibility of a relational knowledge is established. This is a beautiful passage from The Light of Faith, document written by Pope Francis in 2013. It was interestingly started by his predecessor, who was Ratzinger, and then Pope Francis concluded it. So the book itself is an example of this relationality. Without love, truth becomes cold, impersonal, and oppressive for people's day-to-day lives. This is why stories, as Stan was saying, help in looking at the truth. One who loves realizes that love is an experience of truth, that it opens our eyes to see reality in a new way, in union with the beloved. In this sense, love is itself a kind of knowledge possessed of its own logic, which is not against the logic of mathematics or sociology or statistics or theology. This relational way of viewing the world, which then becomes a form of shared knowledge, vision through the eyes of another, and the shared vision of all that exists. So that would be obviously just an embryonic form of relational knowledge and witness, but it's a starting point, as I think Stan was beautifully saying before. So you literally enter the life of someone else when someone shares what they're going through. The third and last element is the problem of realism and transcendence. Let's put it this way, and this is something that David Foster Wallace stresses in his speech, This is Water. I myself have to deal with many concrete, urgent problems, but I see students overwhelmed by urgencies and problems and practical problems of any kind. And so when I address these topics with them, I always ask myself, is this something that can help them? Because they have many other urgent matters to deal with. I do think that it helps because I think it's a real problem. So I don't think that realism is against this thirst for transcendence, I think that it's possible to help realism through a discovery of transcendence, and it's possible to rediscover transcendence by going more deeply into what is material and concrete in our lives. And I chose this other passage from the same speech by David Foster Wallace to describe this. It's very poetic. If you are automatically sure that you know what reality is and you are operating on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you really learn how to pay attention, let's rephrase the first passage. If you're intelligent like me, David Foster Wallace is saying, not myself, he was genius, not only from a literary point of view. If you are very smart and intelligent, you notice many things, and what you see will be a burden. So the more you see, the more you will feel this burden on your shoulders. But the second passage is fascinating, and remember what he said about choose what to worship, choosing what to look at. The second passage is about looking a bit better, a bit deeper. So being even more, quote unquote, intelligent. So if you really learn how to pay attention, then you will know there are other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer health type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that made the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. And the last quote that says the same is by a famous American Jewish writer, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who describes briefly what is, in his view, the reason for the impossibility of denying the possibility of a divine revelation. Let's read it together. Again, we are talking about rediscovering the transcendence from within, urgent, practical, concrete matters. Collecting the memories of the sparks of illuminations we have perceived. And when he says we, he's talking about humanity. So this communal experience that Stan was talking about is present in his view. So my experiences don't left intact his own experiences. It's something that we share, as we said here. So collecting these memories, the installments of insight that have been bestowed upon us throughout the years, we will find it impossible to remain certain of the impossibility of a divine revelation. It's very convoluted, but it's effective. He's not saying, oh, you will believe in God 100%. He's not saying that. He's saying something very similar to what Ratzinger wrote here. Until belief is rejected, it is not until belief is rejected that its unrejectability becomes evident. And he's describing in a more positive fashion the same thing. That is, if we really look at all the experiences that humanity had received, then we will, even if we will try, it will be impossible to think that a divine revelation is impossible. We can think that it never took place. It's different to say that it will never take place or that it's an absurdity in itself. So these are the reasons why I think it's a good idea, the one proposed by Stan, and these are the three elements that somehow describe the method that we will follow in our initiative. Thank you.
Just leave it on.
Stuff share.
I'm not using one.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you all. I have the difficult task of following my two colleagues. And also I have a more difficult task because Stan assigned to me the idea that I have to, give the personal witness. And as if that weren't difficult enough, I'm also going to be doing it in the fall. So what I have to say tonight is going to be different, right, than what I say in the fall, so I don't bore people who come back, right? So I had to figure out what I'm going to talk about that is going to give a hint of like, oh yeah, we want to come back in the fall, right? but also not give the story away. So I thought what I'd talk about is something that happened in the recent years of my life, I'd say in the past 4 years, and that's really my journey to Catholic studies, right? I spent the first 20 years or so of my career at DePaul in the English department. And before that, I was in graduate school for 8 years at the University of Chicago. And if you know anything about English departments or the University of Chicago, they're not really places where people openly talk about being religious at all, or especially being Catholic, right? So I didn't hide. I was always religious. I was raised Catholic, and I've never not been Catholic. There have been times when I practiced my faith more and times when I practiced my faith less, but I've always sort of personally had a certainty of the belief in God, and I always actually loved the Catholic Church my entire life. But I would say for 20 years of my life or so in the English department, I kind of kept it, as they would say, on the down low, right? Like, I didn't advertise it, and if someone asked, I'd say, yes, I'm religious, but I didn't really make it a salient part of my identity. You could say I passed, right? I passed to someone who is a good professor. And this is despite the fact that, right, and this is what I began to think about, from my earliest experience as a child of religion, it was always tied with literature, right? So always my entire life, my experience of God was tied to sort of reading stories about God. So I remember as a very little child, we had these, you guys didn't have them, but they were called anchor books, right? And you read them, and they would tell you stories about Bible, things that happened in the Bible. And I remember some of them so clearly. I remember Jonah the prophet with this little palm tree, right? I'm probably 3 or 4. And I remember really clearly Daniel being thrown into the lion's den, right? And I remember puzzling over the weird names, Shadrach and Melchizedek, right? And just being really thrilled by these stories. And then that even continued up into the fact when I was in middle school, my family, I don't know why, but we had a copy of Butler's Library of the Saints, right? And so every morning before breakfast, other kids are reading the cereal box, I'm reading about St. Cecilia, right? Or St. Elizabeth of Hungary. And it sort of fed my hunger for sort of exemplary lives, right? So I knew Bible stories, I knew exemplary lives. As I went to graduate school, right, and not surprisingly, much of my research has been on women in the 16th century who were teachers of their children, teachers of religion to their children. So I made that my subfield, right? But I always talked about it, even though I was interested in it, I talked about it like, oh yeah, and I was interested in these questions, right? Women's literacy, women's access to sort of authority, all the questions that are sort of okay to ask in secular society, right? Occasionally, I would meet people at conferences and we'd give each other like a little secret, not a secret handshake really, but like, oh, you're Catholic? Hey, I'm Catholic too. You know, hey, we can talk about these things. But again, it was very sort of, you know, down, not secret, because if someone asked, I would say, but I didn't advertise it. So you can ask reasonably, okay, so what changed, right? Really what changed, and this is where it gets personal, is, well, it's all been personal, but about 2.5 years ago, my mom got metastatic cancer. And she went quickly into hospice, and I was there with her at hospice in the days before she died. And I was, you know, I was with her at her death. I'm going to talk about this more in the fall. But I had the experience of her sort of, you know, you're heavily drugged, right? So you're heavily drugged. And so sort of she woke up. And she'd always been a religious person, loved reading about the faith, loved sort of, you know, I got my love of literature and theology from her. But a complicated story there, but that's not important. What's important is in one of her moments of lucidity, she woke up and looked just straight me in the eye and said, Paula, what is there after death? Or what, you know, what if there's nothing, right? And that's a moment, everyone reacts in different ways. And I've had people say to me, well, of course, you just have to lie, right? You just have to say, oh, Mom, it's going to be fine, right? You're going to go to heaven. It's going to be great. I'll see you again, right? I didn't feel that way. How I felt really was this was a moment of high moral stakes, right? I felt it was a moment in which it was impossible to lie. Like it would have been morally repugnant. It would have been such a horrible thing to lie because it was such an important question, right? And I was very grateful. I surprised myself, actually, because I'm not one, and this is all to the point. I've never what's the point of the story before this? I've never advertised my faith, right? I've never wanted to be that witness. I don't want to be up here, you know? I'm not that kind of person. It stands like it's going to be you, Paula. I'm like, okay, right? But what I said is, Mom, I believe that in this, I quoted Paul, in this life we see through a glass darkly, but in the next life we will see God face to face, and we will know what it's like to be known by God, right? And I'm so grateful that I was able to say that and give that witness to her when she sort of needed it the most, right? And then she lapsed back into unconsciousness, right? So all of that sort of changed my ideas about, and the other thing you will learn, hopefully not soon, right, is that parental death really also clarifies things. Because there's a great poem by Andrew Marvell, My Cry Mistress, in which he says, and at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, right? It makes you very clear of the time you have and the time you have left. And I basically decided at that point, you know, I'm done sort of trying to not live two lives, but I'm going to be the sort of person, I'm going to authentically live my faith, right? And do what I can to teach these classes and to sort of share who I am with students. And so that's why I decided to join Catholic Studies. And that's why I decided to talk to you today and do all this. And I just want to close by giving you an example, or sort of, and I've been very happy, not only because I have such excellent colleagues, right? But it's been more symbiotic. It's come together more easily than I even could have imagined. And I want to close with an example of that, which is that, so I'm teaching, I see Eddie is in the chat room and he's in my class right now, and I'm teaching Catholicism 180, right, which is the intro to Catholicism. And it's the first time teaching it, and I'm very happy teaching it. I've loved it. But when we were talking about the nature of God, one of the things we did is we read the parable of the prodigal son. And you probably all know the story. It's a well-known story. And I knew the story, you know, and I'd always taken it. So just there's a wealthy man. He's got two children. The one child sort of, you know, we went over in class. The one child says, he gets restive being at the house, and he says, okay, I want to leave. I want to give me half my money. Give me my inheritance. And we talked in the class about how in the culture that would have been seen as a huge insult, because he's basically telling the father, like, I want you dead, right? You're dead to me, give me my money. So, and then you know the story, the son leaves, he spends it all on wine, women, and song, doesn't have anything. He ends up caring for another neighbor's pigs. And as he's caring for the pigs, he says, well, at my father's house, even the servants eat better than this, right? I'm just gonna go home. And then there's the great scene, which you've probably seen in pictures and movies, of the son coming home and the father running out to greet him, right? And that's always taken as an example, and as it should, of the father's sort of all-encompassing love, right? And the sort of limitless love that God has for his children. But teaching it in this class, and also from my study as a literary person, we all talked about, what I realized is when you read that story, yeah, that first part's great, right? But most of us, or many of us, the real problem in that story from a literary perspective, from a parable perspective, is not that, it's the other kid, right? It's the older brother who sits there and says, I've been good this whole time. What have you done for me, right? I don't have a fatted cow killed for me. I've been virtuous, right? And yet you take this guy back and you welcome in, he gets the party, right? And we talked about that a lot. And sort of what we came to realize in discussion is it's really about sort of, this is what my class was very good at this, God's love is non-transactional, right? It's not based upon you do something for me and you get this back, right? The whole point of that story is that love can't be earned, right? God's love cannot be earned, that it's given regardless of who you are or what you do or how virtuous you are, right? And why am I Catholic? Because I'm interested in that kind of love. Right? And I'm interested in stories and ways of understanding non-transactionality, especially in a world, as was said today, which is so dominated by the market and questions of capitalism, right? And what are you worth? What can you do for me? How have you produced? You know, and we don't value people who can't produce, right? I don't want I want to live in a world which has an awareness of that sort of non-transactional love. And just to take it full circle, after reading that story, I really realized that my favorite stories in Renaissance literature are actually also all about that. My favorite, if you ask me what my favorite book is of all time, it's probably Shakespeare's King Lear. And if you know the story, that's a story which is exactly about the transactional love. A father says, okay, I'm going to retire my kingdom. I have my 3 kids, my 3 daughters come to me, and then he says, perform. Tell me how much you love me, and that's how much I'll give you, right? And 2 of the daughters perform, and then the other daughter does not, right? And she says, no, I love you, but I'm not going to give you anything. And the way the story goes, it shows how the love is based on transaction. What can you do for me? Fails and devolves pretty quickly into savagery. And then it's all about the love of the daughter, this sort of caritas or charity, this non-object-based love that she can show him and that he learns to show, right? So if you think of caritas, we talk about charity, it's non-object-based love. That means I love you regardless of who you are or what you can do for me or what you've done, right? And King Lear is very interested in that. And so thinking about connections between that and realizing that there's a symmetry in these sort of questions, or also, just to finally conclude, my favorite poet, John Donne, his holy sonnets, you may have heard them. Well, John Donne is someone who is obsessed with he's stuck in this world in which he thinks he can earn God's love, or he needs to do something to deserve God's love. So he's arguing with God. He's like, burn me, blow me, do something to me because I'm not getting it, right? He's fighting with God. And then you read that against his near contemporary, George Herbert, who instead of yelling at God, depicts a conversation in which God is someone who invites you in and says, what do you need? Right? And then the speaker keeps saying, well, let me do this, let me do that, I need to do this. And the poem ends, and it's this dialogue, and the poem ends with God saying in the poem, no, you just need to sit and eat. And then he sits. Right? So do you see that it's another dramatization of the same thing? The need to accept, not to do, just to accept that kind of love, right? So all of this is to say that I'm very happy that even though I came to this kind of slow, as Milton says about his poetry, late in life, right? I came to sort of this thing. I see it as very connected. And for me, it has been a way of more profoundly living and teaching the questions, which animate me in my life and my experience. So thank you.
Now it's time for some interactions, and we have some time to sharing your anything you want to say about what you have heard or what you didn't hear. This is just to whet your appetite, and it's good the way we planned it. Wanted it to be actually a small community, and then gradually it will grow. So feel free to speak about if you have questions, if you're happy, if you're puzzled, if
Thoughts?
thoughts, yeah.
I have a question. You guys had mentioned that this was the first meeting about Catholic talk within professors. Will there be more in the future? Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, every month, beginning in September, every last Thursday of the month, we'll have this gathering, and we will be happy if you leave your contacts with us so you will be notified, and tell the story, what you have heard, pass on, word of mouth. So they say now you don't do fundraising, you do friend raising. So what we're trying to do is friend raising. We want to create friendship around these stories. So in September, what you heard now from Paula is a preview.
So So you will take a break during the summer because of the.
Yes, then September we start. So we use the summer to keep on promoting it, through all forms of social media as well as other DePaul means of disseminating information. Are you a DePaul student?
Yes, I am. And I've taken some honors classes because I'm part of the honors program. And curiosity, I don't really know so much about the classes that are here at DePaul for Catholic Studies because it wasn't really a requirement that we had to take for the program. And he actually focuses a lot on the classics, the Catholic classes here. So he tells me about it, and I'm like, okay, I would like to learn a little bit more. I want to see what else DePaul has to offer for our Catholic community.
And some of us also teach in the honors program.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Some of us in Catholic Studies also teach courses in the honors program.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering if anyone was an honors professor here. What classes do you teach?
Into philosophy, philosophical inquiry.
Oh, okay. I took that with Professor Khan. She also taught that, and I took that my freshman year.
Yeah, I really appreciate the philosophic approach to like Catholicism. I haven't really heard much of that. What would you suggest to like start getting more into that? Like who should I look to read or listen to or anything to like kind of get more into that side of things? Because I think it gives like a really good perspective on like, I mean, like the like great thinkers. A lot of times I feel like they're more atheist.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, I think takes away from religion. So who would you suggest to read?
Well, it's a broad question.
Yeah.
We can discuss it while eating something afterwards, but maybe you can try with Pascal, Blaise Pascal, who was
Is
also a mathematician.
Was that Pascal's wager? Is that the
Yes,
same guy?
exactly.
Okay.
But that's just one mental experiment that he was just a small portion of his work. And that's one possibility. But if you later maybe you can share with me what are your interests, and I can come up with a long list of
Yeah.
readings.
I would definitely like to do
Be
that.
careful, be careful. I will give you books, not only physical books.
Yeah.
Just want to share, I'm Jacob's mom. So I've always believed in God. I was raised Catholic, but I didn't really understand my faith until I was like in my 30s. And the way I believe in God, or how I guess I came to that realization was God, we all have like this emptiness in our hearts and our souls that can only be filled by God. But, and that's how I guess for me, that's how I understood it. And it wasn't until I had that, I guess, that encounter with him that I realized that nothing else was fulfilling. Like, yeah, you can find love in your husband, your spouse, but, and obviously your children, you know, like, but the actual like first love, I think, would, in my opinion, is God. Just wanted to share that with
I think there was an atheist philosopher who said it. You might be able to say the name. Who said everyone's born with a God-shaped hole. Yeah, God-shaped hole. Do you know who that was?
C.S. Lewis.
Was it?
That is C.S. Lewis.
Yes, C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
That's like very closely related.
But C.S. Lewis is another great.
Goes on the right here.
This is
I was-
the Bartlett crew.
I was really moved by the part of the presentation where it cited a quote that asked, it said, "Why should I cry out for a God that does not exist?" Now, I'm kind of interested on further looking into that kind of perspective. I was wondering if you could point me in a direction.
But you can start with Lagerfist.
What was the name?
Lagerfist, I can give you
Okay.
the name of was a Swedish writer. But yeah, I can think of other authors as well.
I like how you said that love is non-transactional. I kind of have a question. Does that basically mean God loves everyone no matter what? Or like,
Means it doesn't depend on anything you do
Yeah.
or can't do.
I think that's a great writer that connects this question to your question that you just asked is Graham Greene.
Oh, Graham Greene's great.
Graham Greene speaks of this absence of God, not as something that simply doesn't exist, but that it can be felt as an absence. And also he deals with this non-transactional law. For instance, The End of the Affair is a great novel that deals with this, or Power and Glory.
It's very readable.
Yeah.
And
I have a question. So like, how would you recommend or like your advice when like you're going through difficult times and like you want to keep up your faith? Sometimes like it's really hard to keep up with it. So how would you recommend?
Well, what I do, and then they can all answer for themselves. What I do is to, even when I have doubts about God's existence, I still ask Him to reveal Himself. So the first point is that I keep praying, even if I cannot see Him, I'm present to make Himself visible. And the second thing is that I look for friends. I look for friends that can help. Real friends. I don't know if you
I go to church, but not, I mean, I know church can seem boring, right? I get it, but I think I'm very heartened by the sense of the community, the doctrine of the community, community of faith, that everyone who went before you and everyone who's going to be born, community of saints, right, are there with you. And I think the liturgy is actually, understood rightly, a gift because it makes things palatable and understandable, and it's like a gift to you. And again, non-transactionality, like all you have to do is take it, right? And so that has been helpful to me, just because it makes it easier. I sometimes when you pray, I don't feel like I can do it on my own, but to be within that kind of community, recognizing it's imperfect, right? It's not like always perfect, right, by any means. C.S. Lewis again writes about being next to someone in church and like looking at them snoring or like smelling or whatever. I mean, it's not, what?
In the screw tape letters.
Exactly. In the screw tape letters, exactly. Put them next to, but it's a strength, I think. And I get strength too that it's, just the sense of time. It's 2,000 years, right? It's been there, it'll outlive us. It's just, it's there and it's always there for you.
I think I call it relational resilience. Relational resilience is something that emerges when you open up to someone. Like my colleagues have said, friendship. Someone said you are as sick as your secret. So the less you keep it in, the lighter it becomes. But it's very important the bonds you have. That's why I think friendship is a virtue that we need to cultivate more. Need to cultivate more. If you ask me what has helped me, overall, is that I've been lucky to have good friends. And that's where I need to work more. I'm quick with not associating with people who actually don't give me energy. There are people you talk to about things, you get worse. You talk to some people, your problem, they multiply your problem. You say someone is like, I'm going to hit that person, they will say, I'll give you a hammer. I'll give you a hammer. So, the story in the Bible after the reign of Solomon. You might know the story. The people were complaining, like Solomon was a slave driver, making life miserable for people. So his son that took over met some elders who advised him, people are really tired. Your dad was not, not that wise. They suffered under his government. Lighten their burden. Then he goes and meets some friends. They say, oh, don't show any weakness. Tell them that if my dad, if he taxed you 50%, my tax rate will be 100. Don't show any weakness. And then he came and said, okay, I'm gonna, you guys don't mess with me. And then that led to the breakup of the kingdom. He lost the kingdom. So I think find good friends. And if you can find one, you be one to another. And then in that you find relational resilience. That's what I recommend. And also you notice in the Bible, Jesus uses the word. He says, I call you friends. We need to recover friendship. I think the world needs to recover friendship.
I would like to add to that. I think the most important thing is being able to connect with one another. As you guys had mentioned, if we are in an individual space, we won't be able to see what others have saw about God and their experience as well. And being able to connect in a community would help you push you out of that environment where, oh, I'm concerned, I am worried, I'm in depression, and just being able to attend more talks about witnesses is what has helped me in my image of God, and hearing about others as well and how their love to God and God's love to us has affected them in their lives.
Just for those who are joining us by Zoom, if you guys have anything, let me check if there are texts. I don't know. I don't seem to see any. Okay, there are no reactions. If you can raise your hand if you want to speak, those joining us, unmute yourself. We'd like to hear from you. We don't want you to feel that you forgot you're part of this community. So
Eddie.
Eddie,
Hi, Professor McQuaid. I enjoyed your talk about the non-transactional love,
Hear you.
and
It's probably us.
let's, we can't hear. How do we minimize this to see the volume?
You go up on top and then.
Huh? Can you unmute yourself, Eddie?
Oh, yeah, he's muted.
yeah, can you guys hear me? Or
He's not now.
you guys
I have
know?
no clue how to find out if.
You can do one thing, but I'm not sure it'll work. You make it smaller and then you go down here. Do you
The volume's up.
Where's the guy? It's like
That's
Joe.
Yes, it's a tech guy. So someone should go into the meeting on their laptop.
Did you say something now?
You guys hear me?
Oh, still no, okay. So no go.
You could go into the meeting on your laptop with the code and then get sound through the laptop.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you can definitely
Because
do
the
that.
mic's working.
The problem is you'll get feedback. So the moment you
Yeah.
open that,
So it can be a problem.
yes,
Well, only
please.
if the speaker was on, right? Would you get?
Eddie, can you say something now?
Can you hear me?
Hear you on my end.
Yeah,
Oh, Eddie, he can hear Eddie.
sorry, still no. Yeah, no, I almost, this should, I sense that the computer itself, but you joined directly from the,
Now we join directly. No, we use the setting that say share.
yeah. Oh, so you actually joined through the, so you logged on first? Or did you hit like join from this main screen?
From this screen.
That should, that's supposed to work. Yes,
He's gonna like.
try relogging out again on this end.
What?
Once
Oh my
you're-
God.
once you're-
Just ask Eddie to type his question.
Eddie, can you type your question?
Sorry, Eddie.
No, I didn't.
Um,
I saw.
Any other further insights?
Sorry, Eddie.
We're sorry. And in September, we will have a technical support here on the ground to make sure everything works fine.
But thank you for your question.
Yeah. Eddie, what's your, okay, Ed. Any other insight?
I want to ask the Bartlett crew why they came.
I just like listening to Stan.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Anyone else?
No other incentive, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would say mainly, like, for me at this point in my life, I've always believed in religion, I've always been a Catholic, a practicing Catholic, but at the same time, I've never been 100% like sure of like the topic as a whole, because it's a massive topic. And I would say one thing that I appreciated from you guys' presentation is unlike any other, I'd say very few like sermons or anything like that I've like attended in my life, very few have brought external like research into it. Typically, it's just like from the Bible stories and such, but you guys had like a philosophical standpoint, which I appreciated.
I had a question too. You said something that I kind of connected with. You kind of explained how you would never like advertise that you're religious, but you would always kind of secretly be.
Yeah.
My question is like, do you think there's like a difference sort of, or like an internal conflict from like sort of secretly being religious but not kind of openly sharing it?
Did it cause an internal conflict?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's why I decided. I mean, I kind of read that thing as my mom saying, you're going to be a witness, right?
Yeah.
Because everything I write, I mean, so yes, I do, because you're kind of hiding yourself, right? But, you know, I mean, you guys are all in, especially in, I mean, I don't want to say especially in English departments, but it's not cool, right? To be religious. It's kind of like you're not one of the cool kids. And so that was more of it. And that's a false way to live. And I think as you get older, like for me, I'm just like, screw it. You know, I'm going to be who I am because, you know, TikTok, right? So, but that's, I mean, you're the whole world before you, but there's still that sense of living. I mean, you guys, your age talks a lot about living authentically, right? And I think that is something true, right? You have to be authentic and be who you are. And so it's partially that decision as well. But I'm still uncomfortable with, you know, I'm not out there on a street corner preaching, you know? So, but yeah, just not being a little more open.
We have a question here. What are the signals to determine if God is speaking or using a friend or even a stranger to communicate a message to you, especially when you are in a devastating state?
You are the expert on signals.
That's what, yeah. I also felt that he would be the one to answer that question.
I don't think one of the most difficult aspects of being a minister, a priest, for me is when people ask me to interpret what God is saying. Because I am very, I feel inadequate to say authoritatively, I get it. I rather stay with the person and journey, accompany the person as the person enters deeper into the mystery, so that it's not simply my affirmation of what is going on, but our co-traveling into that mystery, where it will be like the disciples on the way to Emmaus, when then they suddenly realize our heart was burning within us. This, for me, I think is what accompaniment is. So Jesus walks with them, listens, and they hear him. And through that dialogue, something is opened. Just as St. Augustine says, God is closer to me than I am to myself. In that sense, I would say to UG, to stay with what you're hearing and be patient. I think the journey for me, the journey of faith is the more uncertain it becomes, even the happier I become myself from my own experience, because it means that I can, a wider horizon is opening. If it's so clear, then it's something Augustine said in the introduction of his book, the Doctrina Christiana, where he begins to say there are two parts to entering into understanding God. There's the part of discovery, and there's the part of explanation. It's not the way I discover my religious experience might not be exactly the way I will explain it to another, you know. However, then he wondered, why is it hard to make this discovery? Especially when you're reading the Bible. Why is the Bible so hard? You know, multiple interpretation. Augustine in his own way said, well, if you understood it easily, then you become proud. You know, oh, I grabbed. So I would say to UG is to stay with the mystery a bit. And because sometimes when we are going through difficult time, you know, the fight or flight, you want to run away, you want to escape. But prayer, that's where prayer really comes. And sometimes, you know, like when I would tell my own narrative of terrible, terrible tragedies I have been through, you know, my family, in my growing up as a little boy, you know, what I saw, the mark I have from seeing my friend step into this explosion, you know, and you see so many things like in life that really how do you come through this is through prayer. A lot of prayers, and it's not just repeating things, is actually letting be. So that's what I would say, UG. And sometimes also friends are like angels that God sent to open your eyes, to free yourself from being imprisoned within that single narrative. So we begin to see small intimations of redemption that emerges. Eddie, can you speak now? Can raise the volume.
Yeah, but it's muted.
Can you hear me?
Eddie, can you speak now?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Not
Can you?
working. Sorry.
Can.
Sorry.
They have a
Hold on to
a
that. We
problem with
have
their
a few
consoles.
minutes, but like any other
You
insight.
appreciated your answers.
Okay, thank you. The good thing
I've
is
never
that-
received such
Yeah.
feedback from.
I hear it.
I don't turn red when I blush. You see.
I told you that you're
I'm
an
blushing
expert
now. So Any other insight? So,
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you guys.
thank you all for being here. Thank you. And stay tuned for the next.
See you in the fall.
Yes.
And if you send me an email, I can give you some
Okay, yeah.
names, some ideas.
Write your email.
And get more bites. We have, take something with you. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Catholic
We
history
appreciate it.
courses here
Ah.
at Paul.
With
And,
Matt McGuire?
Yep.
Ah,
and so he kind of really pointed me towards Catholic literature.
he's a great scholar.
In our class, we read Boethius, we read Augustine.
Here's a,
A lot of really interesting texts that I still have
Yeah, Yannick.
that I should definitely read more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, he's an expert on Piquet, who's a very particular French poet. Piquet too can help him on that idea that I
Thank you.